I know we want the best of this lesson, and really, very often when schools want to embark on lesson study, my first question to them is, "What's your point? What's the purpose?" And it's really about changing culture. I brought Faisal with me to Japan, right, to really bring that team to understand the origins of lesson study. And for us to adopt lesson study, it requires a lot of mindset change. It's not just about skill set. Yeah. So I think as we are here learning to look at what we've just observed and share openly in terms of how can we have a better lesson, how does that improve our practices, how do we actually see the lesson from our students' eye? I think these are the critical questions that we want to hear. So I'm very appreciative also of the comments, because so far, number one, it talks about the content learning, whether that flow of lesson makes sense to us. Meaning to say, for example, how the lessons have been planned, the design of the task, the interaction of the students, as well as the focus of the lesson. Right? Madam Irma, right, point about the student, whether she sees that, and I'm very encouraged when I see the kind of feedback that you all write down, as you all scribe, and the students. And the amazing thing is this: I can tell that it's not the first time that the students are being observed, because and they are pretty familiar with lesson study, because they're simply oblivious to you taking copious notes beside them. So that's a good thing, because at least the sake that when your comments came, so sometimes we can human being human, we cannot emotionally, we cannot segmentize it so well. That's where when we film videos, I need to use that. You need to say actually the video that you filmed during class, not just today but subsequently when you do lesson study during the colloquium, use it to run through, so that you can fast forward. But the idea is when we want to focus on students, you see first, then we talk about those who have observed the student. You use the evidence to highlight them. Remember again, as this is wonderful, right? Using focus on the students, not the teachers. Which means to say the way that the video should be positioned, whether you have somebody to assist you or whether you're doing it yourself, right? This is I feel so far the schools that I've observed, I find that it's useful to capture it, because the thing is when you are filming the teacher, putting it at the side way, filming the teacher and filming maybe the two groups nearby, right? You are actually focusing on the flow of the lesson. But the idea of lesson study is to put ourselves down and to know how a student see that lesson, how a student hear that lesson, and how the students react to that lesson. If you see the way that classrooms have, generally all your classrooms are being positioned, students here, whiteboard, right? Your projector, your visualizers this side. Actually a very nice way to balance the dynamic of the class. I'm not a feng shui person, but I'm looking at just making sure that the students feel comfortable. It's having it here, so that as I'm filming the class, you are capturing what the teachers say, but at the same time I am also capturing a wide angle of the students' responses. So you don't really need to count, like for example, how many students raise hand, what are the kind of questions asked, because you can capture that. Most of our research lessons is such that it is, you start with a whole class address. Thereafter you go into group activities. Right? This is where then during the whole class address, if I have time, or maybe the TA can help us, is to actually record. I spend this amount of time on this first part. So even though on paper your lesson planning is say 5 minutes, 8 minutes, but in reality, especially if you want a refined lesson for subsequent, the idea of lesson study is to make sure that the subsequent lesson is learned. Then this is where we start to put in the exact details. Right? This actually took 8 minutes. Students struggle. You say 1 minute for reading, but you know that after 1 minute when you watch the video, most of the students are still head down, which means 1 minute is sufficient. How then can we make sure that students are ready to move on? Otherwise, you're keeping them in the cold. Okay? So that when it's group activity, then you take it and then you go deep. Okay? One thing that I'm kind of curious to find out is this, because there are so many of you observing the students, but the comments really is, how do some of the students react? Really the reaction of students, and I was looking at how some of you are taking notes. You are writing what students are writing. That's one way. At the same time, are you also listening and looking at the facial expression? A skilled observer, right? A skilled observer actually learns to look at reaction of students. For example, Farid, some of his lessons you realize that he was spinning his pen like that, whiteboard marker. Was he being engaged? Some people say, hey, it's pen spinning, you are either lost or you are just bored. Right? But the fact is, if you look at his angle, his gaze, he's thinking. You can see also at the side of his lips, he's actually talking to himself. That's his mental processing. There's another student, Elena. She seems to me a fast learner. That said, she also spins. When she's thinking, she stops spinning. When she's ready, she starts swinging her legs. Did you observe things like that? A skilled observer also notices the gaze, how the dilation of the eyeball. Okay, I know this too much. I'm not asking you all to stand, but really, you off your side, you know, you don't want to give the students undue stress, but you should also notice whether the students, you know, whether they are engaged, because you want to look at whether they know. You're saying whether the students really know. So if you're observing them close enough, right, when, you know, how often do they stay stationary? How often do they move their heads? Right, what kind of talk do they use? It's important. I noticed one thing that's very nicely done is you have used flip charts to capture the key points. Question here is, how are the flip charts helping you to reinforce that learning? Very beautiful points that you have captured. Right? The thing is, when, you know, is it useful then at junctures to say, hey, let's have a look at what we've got so far, so that you are also helping them to do the recap. Right? Along the way, the flip chart should be paced out, I feel, so that at least even if the child is distracted, what would they be distracted with? Distracted with what you have written. You know, rather than for their eyes to wonder what the bird fly past, or the teachers just stare and scolded at our student. The teacher probably just come out of the toilet being so flustered. They are looking at their learning. You know, so if you're using that, that's a powerful tool. Keep that around, but use that and occasionally refer it. Hey, we said this earlier. Does anybody remember that? Any questions about that? Can somebody help me recap some of these? You know what I mean? So you are helping them to draw attention back. So that's where the scoping and the focusing of the students is.